Hi, this is Bethany with the Greater Albany Meditation Project, and I'm here with Rich Goodhart, who has taught at Omega for the last 15 years and taught at Propalo and does many concerts in the area, and he's also studied consciousness for 30 years. So I'm looking forward to talking with him today. Hey Rich, how are you?
Hello, thank you. Thank you for having me on your series.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. So can you tell everyone a little bit about how you got into shamanism and sound healing?
Sure. Well, I was a musician first, and as a teenager, really drawn to a lot of the art rock that was happening in the 70s. Bands like Yes in particular was one band that really dealt with some grand themes. It wasn't, the traditional rock and roll sorts of love story type things. And they, one of their biggest pieces, Tales from Topographic Oceans, was inspired by something that John Anderson had read in Autobiography of a Yogi by Yogananda. And another one of their great works, Close to the Edge, was inspired by Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha, a Buddhist story. And so that music really opened up a world. It spoke to, a lot. If you went into that music, you were drawn into the lyrics. It really opened up inquiry into the magical world, the world beyond what is seen on the television. Often.
Right.
So that opened up a lot of thought. It opened up reading. Drew me to reading different kinds of books and listening to different kinds of things. And eventually studied meditation. When I was about 20, learned TM, the Transcendental Meditation Technique. That was very popular then. And beyond that, studied other kinds of meditation practices, began practicing yoga, Qigong and Tai Chi, learned those practices, those Chinese, very meditative martial arts kind of practices. And also, around 20 or so, my early 20s, began reading Carlos Castaneda, which opened up that whole shaman world, the shamanism world. Those books being, many of your viewers will probably know them, and know that they first began coming out in the 60s and really introduced the Western world to indigenous shamanism. Native Americans in Mexico and South America really opened up that world as well. So reading those books really resonated with me. I really felt drawn into them. I felt a deep connection with those books and didn't necessarily think consciously, I'm going to be a shaman. And I still don't call myself that, but I work with that kind of work and that kind of energy and practices. And probably in retrospect, I did know at that time that I was, that was a path. I was on that path. But it was a while before I consciously thought, now I'm going to study with shamans, or I'm going to study sound healing. All of those things just kind of came naturally over time, where the music that I was doing slowly, organically grew more into a healing practice than I'm playing in a bar kind of thing, or something where you're just performing songs for other reasons, maybe. But the music grew. The studying Tai Chi, Qigong grew, became more. I teach that now. I teach Qigong. I teach shamanism and teach sound healing. I do shamanic sound healing, where it really all comes together. And there's an intensive when you're on staff at Omega that I teach for staff. It's like a month-long training that is, it talks about it on my website more if people want to read about it, but it's a shamanic sound healing that involves all three. Really interwoven together.
I can see how they just blend together, and it's probably hard for you to even just kind of talk about one without talking the other too, the way they all kind of blend together. So can you explain to people about what shamanic journeying is and how it's kind of slightly different than our everyday level of consciousness?
Yeah, sure. Shamanic journeying, there are shamans all over the world in indigenous cultures. The word actually comes from a particular group of people in Siberia area where they use the word shaman, but it's become like the sort of generic word to apply to the indigenous healers around the world. We call them shaman, as sort of just become that standard kind of word. The cultures themselves will have different names, but there's the medicine people, the healers, the energy workers in indigenous cultures. And to go into that realm sound, for one thing, all around the world they've used sound music in different ways. Some may use the gong, some may use the bowls. The bowls, these Himalayan bowls from the monks in the Himalayas, developed this incredible art of creating these bowls, which are designed like in an instant to take you into meditative place.
Right.
But different cultures have different instruments, different ways of using sound, and other plant medicines and other ways to go into shamanic journey. But in that shamanic journey, you drop into, it takes you to a place where you shut off the chatter in your mind. Particularly in the Western world, it's worse than ever now with computers and cell phones and everything. We're bombarded with information all the time that is really keeping us away from the moment. This endless input keeps you away from the present moment. Whatever you're doing, if you're checking your email or texting or whatever, while you're driving with one hand texting with another,
right.
even if you're sitting in a park, if you're texting all the time, you're not in the park. You're not present.
So
There's so much happening just with the rain, or right now the sound of snow dripping off the melting snow dripping off the roof, or the animals or the birds, or just the wind, or energies of people, everything. We're taken away from that. But in the shamanic journey, you go. It takes you to a place of turning off your mind, turning off the chatter, and when that happens, you can drop into a deeper state of awareness. And in that awareness, you can drop into different states of consciousness. The theta state of consciousness. There are different alpha, beta, delta, theta states. In the theta state, you're still awake and conscious, but you're no longer necessarily sitting in the room here. And you can then kind of go into that dream world consciously. And in that world, it's, you can have like sort of fantastical journeys, but it isn't just about like, I'm taking a trip to Disneyland in my mind. That's like a nice aspect of it, but it can also be a little scary too. It can be a little nightmarish depending on what you encounter. But the thing is that you're shutting off the surface chatter, and you're going into a deeper level of your awareness. In that deeper level of awareness, you can encounter a lot of different kinds of information, healing information. If you're dealing with some kind of illness, you can encounter alignments within yourself where you can heal, where you can access the deeper level of your own healing.
Right.
Any kind of healing, going to doctors and getting prescribed a medicine or something or whatever.
Right.
Ultimately the healing, if it takes effect, it really has to come from within.
Absolutely.
Being born, we're wounded. I think we come into this world as a human, and we all have different kinds of traumas, and some certainly far more worse than others. I'm not trying to minimize anybody's significant trauma, but you can have a trauma as a child or as a teenager or who knows when, and it's affecting you 20 years, 30 years later or whatever, and it affects you emotionally, it affects your health in different ways. And the shamanic journey can take you into a realm where you can access the energy around that trauma and release it and heal it and open it up, and and not even necessarily relive the trauma. You don't have to go in and relive some terrible accident that happened when you were 2 years old and you don't remember, but it can access that energy that's around it that's still affecting you now, and it can open that up and release it.
So it's kind of like changes our filters, right? So there's a lot of kind of reality going on right now. I've got certain filters in my nervous system that's kind of letting certain things in, and then by going into these deeper states, it's kind of like, some filters shut down, others open up, and you're able to kind of access this intuitive wisdom that's within us that we don't have access to in our everyday consciousness.
Right.
Is that it? And certainly, I know that with so much, like you were saying, with cell phones and things like that, people are so used to being so jumpy, checking their cell phones and doing their texting, and that what I find is people are too nervous to kind of let go of the cell phone long enough to be able to get still enough to go into these beautiful spaces. And that's really unfortunate because, as you're saying, there's this richness within all of us. And what I find interesting about the bowls and the sound, Rich is gonna play for us a little bit, and if you're just even close to these bowls, you can feel this beautiful vibration that kind of just like as he was saying, these bowls are designed to just lull us into these deeper spaces. And when we go into these deeper spaces, it's this beautiful softness and richness within. And the more we practice it, the more it gets easier to access. Is that correct?
Yeah, and ideally, in traditional cultures of the shaman, these medicine people, it's not necessarily even separate for a lot of them. It's not like, okay, now I'm going to do my shaman time.
Right.
The shaman may be, preparing
If I
dinner.
live there, yeah.
Or out,
Absolutely.
Fixing
Right.
his shoes or something.
Yeah.
And he's in that state simultaneously so that he can access that,
That's right.
one thing, of course, is to access it yourself. And when I do a shamanic sound healing event, or even one-on-one, if I have a one-on-one with a person or as a group thing, is I'll facilitate taking you there. But, the shaman themselves can also do work for you. They can access that state and work with you, so they have that, developed ability. But yeah, it becomes, the more you develop it, the less separate it becomes from your daily life.
Right.
It just becomes, because it is, like you said, with this richness, it's part of all of us.
Right.
It's our birthright. It's
Right.
it's part of the fullness of being human.
Yeah.
And when you're there, then the melting snow dripping off the roof can be a very rich experience.
Right.
I can sit there and listen to that, and to have to text someone. I mean, I don't even have a cell phone, so I don't text anybody. But
Right.
if the phone rings or something, that kind of information is a downgrade.
Right.
To me,
Right.
it's a downgrade of
Oh,
information from
interesting.
the
Right.
information that you get when you listen to the wind and the birds. And for one thing, there's an entertainment there. That's kind of a weird word, but there's something that's very rewarding just about being able to tune into that and hear those deeper levels of sound in the world. But beyond that, again, it's accessing a layer. It helps you to access a layer of consciousness where you can think clearer. You can solve problems that are issues on your mind. You can intuit things. You can tune into someone else's energy better. If someone's
Right.
hurt or emotional issues in some way, and you don't know what's going on with them, but all of this dropping out of, John Lennon said, put into a song, relax, turn off your mind, and float downstream. And some people take that as, oh yeah, well, I do that when I drink beer at night. But there's a difference in that it's not an escape so much. That it's a turning off of the chatter. It's relaxing, turning off the world in a way, but coming to a very alive place.
Right.
And he was talking about that in that song as well. And that's what, through this work, it can dispel, shut off a lot of the noise of the world, but then it takes you to a very deeper place of awareness.
It kind of strikes me as when you really get to savor life and the preciousness of it. I mean, this is the kind of spaces that you're in. I mean, I think so many times we kind of take our lives for granted, but when you're kind of living from these deep spaces, you can start to, you get that savoring, like you're saying, of savoring of sound, and that's when we're really living life. I mean, that's when life,
I think so.
yeah. It's a vibrancy, there's a preciousness to it, there's a high awareness, deep meaning, deep engagement, and certainly that's what, so many people are looking for when they're watching the TV or those types of things, I mean, and so training ourselves to be able to go into this ourselves, I think, is so important.
Yeah.
Rich, can you...
And I think, too, when you say about the, I think when we watch TV or we go to a movie or, drink or whatever,
Right.
these things, part of the motivation, it isn't just to obliterate the world. There is a deep calling to a deeper
Yeah.
experience. You want that deeper.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to, also diss popular
No,
culture.
no,
It's sort
right.
of
Right.
that draw is there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think some of these other ways, though, get you there more authentically and get you there in a way that you're empowered within yourself, where some things may not.
Yeah, and just for instance, I know in a lot of the workshops I've done, people watch TV and then they feel bad that they sat in front of the television for so long. When you go into these places, you come back and you just kind of feel deeply enriched. It's like time that you just know that you did something really profound for yourself, and it's just a nice option, you know. I mean, we need to have different options in life. So if you could tell people about where you're going to be speaking sometime soon.
Okay. Well, for one thing, you can go to my website, which is RichGoodhart.com, and that's spelled RichGoodhart.com. And there is information there on my recordings. I have 6 albums out. I have a book out. I'm actually working on a new book now. There's a page there where it lists some of the workshops and goes into some deeper descriptions of the workshops. And publicly, locally, I do quite a few things. Coming up in March 24th, I think a Sunday afternoon, I'll be at the Yoga Lily in Clifton Park. We'll be doing a shamanic sound healing experience. These instruments, I play a lot of other instruments, stringed instruments, African, Middle Eastern drums, all kinds of things, Native American flute. So I use a lot of instruments to take you into this healing shamanic energy work. Also in Duanesburg at Sleeping Dragon Farm on April 13th, I believe, it's a Saturday, we'll be doing a full-on 3-hour deep immersion in the sound medicine.
That sounds fun.
I'm teaching Qigong at the Yoga Lily again in March. We're doing Saturday morning classes. And other things will be coming up. They're not necessarily on the website yet, but I'm kind of putting together the schedule right now.
Great. Okay, and Rich will be at Numinous in the beginning of June. Can you close by playing some music for us?
Yeah, let's just end with a little bit of sound, a little bit of brief sound meditation.
Good deal.
So thank you.
No, thanks. Thank you very much.